Welcome to the 2 Month Review, the weekly podcast brought to you by Open Letter and 3%, in which we take one book, break it down section by section, bit by bit, talk about it, analyze it, have fun, make jokes. I am Chad Post from Open Letter Books, joined as always by Kaya Stramanis, editor at Open Letter Books and translator from the Latvian. How are you doing, Kaya?
I'm exhausted and I'm here. How are you?
Yeah, I was also I also should be very exhausted, but I'm doing okay. I also should say
Right.
this is although I have to preface everything. I didn't think about it until I got on here, but I have my Cardinals shirt on, and I'm currently no longer a Cardinals fan. And I just want to point out that we are not in support of Cardinals celebrations that acknowledge Trump. The 2 month review is officially severing ties with the St. Louis Cardinals baseball club for the time being.
Oh shit.
Yep. Until
Maybe
they
we shouldn't maybe we should just forget the book and talk this through like
if you wanna if we wanna get into politics, we can talk about fucking couches, Diet Mountain Dew, and the Cardinals. All baseball players in general. There's been a rash of people doing a celebration in which they cup one ear and put up their fist and yell fight after they get a big hit. And the Cardinals were the first to do it a day or two after the Trump near assassination. They didn't yell fight, to be fair. What they did though is cup their ear and yell their pump their fist, and everyone was like, "Oh fuck! Like this is not good. This is a bad thing to do."
and these
And
players are not being facetious. They meant this in
uh,
earnest.
they, when asked about it, they said, "Oh, it's not political. It's just a reference to how Alec Burleson, like this, like truly big burly white dude, used to be a DJ in college, and this is what he looked like when he was a DJ in college." And I don't think anyone this side of the Mississippi or this north of the Mason-Dixon line is buying that bullshit. So yeah, tough times for my fandom for sure. Not
Mm-mm.
cool. Not cool.
Oof.
So this is definitely not it's not even pro Cardinals. It's just an accident. I didn't even think about it.
This is
But
this is a household with its identities in flux.
very true, very true. Well, I mean, speaking of identities in flux, Lanark, the book that we are covering this
Mhm.
season, by Alistair Gray. Today we're going to be talking about the pages. I gotta figure out where we actually were because I read ahead last week, so I knew how to like frame the end of our conversation. But
Yeah.
we're covering
we-
specifically pages 335 through
Yep.
397. This bridges two sections. It ends the part what would be book two, which is the more realistic section about Duncan Thaw's life, his struggles as becoming an artistic painter, his mural in the church, his relationships to women, and then goes into book four, which is back to the Institute and Lanark and the world of Unthank and that whole situation. So we had two sections, and we should really try and keep them, I think, a little bit separate at first, and then maybe talk about them together.
Mhm.
Um, and I don't know exactly where to start with this, but in preparation for for today's episode in particular, I had to go back and look at where like the kind of confusing ending section to his thing, but more importantly, I looked up a lot of reviews, as many reviews as I could find, just like interpretation of Lanark, review, essay on Lanark, and I know that there are like ones within academic journals that would like sort of be more towards what I was looking for. But on general Google searches and on all the ones I was finding, right, be it from the Guardian, Yale Review, people's blogs, whatever, one of the things I found very interesting is how little description or analysis there is of the Unthank sections. Um, Generally speaking, almost every one of these reviews is basically like, this book is wild. Its parts are out of order. The epilogue comes four chapters before the end. It begins with book three. It's confusing. This section is Kafkaesque. And I was sort of like shocked by that. Um, uh, in the sense that like that's like such a kind of cop out in a way, but also kind of points to the fact that we don't really do a lot of good critical analysis or like explanations. It's just sort of like gestures towards goodness, um, or like or dislike, instead of like actually trying to make any claims to it. I think like what the reason I was looking it up and the reason I'm bringing it up is that I was running into the problem of like I I don't know how to talk about sections of this book. Like I don't one of the reviews I read that I thought was really quite interesting is someone being like, I didn't read this book for until I was 23. I was born in 1981, the same year the book came out. So it's like, okay, cool for you, child. But they're like, yeah, I don't know why I like it, but I like it. And like, it's a good book because I don't, something about it made me like it. And I was sort of having that feeling at times reading this, and especially when we get to talking about what is book 4, those bits that feel very allegorical, that are very Kafka-esque, that have like loaded with like various imagery and various like ideas and possible metaphors, that I always, in any book across time, I always feel a little bit at sea and usually like have an adverse reaction to it. Like I'm not a huge, like I like Kafka, but I'm not a huge Kafka fan because I find all of it a little bit tedious to like be like, aren't things bureaucratically weird and things are tough and things don't make sense and logic is strange, and things that are super like overly surreal and don't like hold like a certain like system that keeps them in place. I usually don't really care for those either. And yet in this book, I'm always kind of compelled to keep reading it. There's something that's good about it. And I hope that with the last, like, I guess we have 5 episodes of this left, 4 episodes of this left, that we can actually try and do some descriptive work on part 4 and part 1, or
Mhm.
part 3, books 3 and books 4, to give at least some sort of roadmap for someone who is coming to this and is like, I don't know what this is, but I kind of like it, but I'm not sure we are. I just wanted to preface everything by saying that.
Yeah, and I think that'd be very interesting, to make a roadmap, especially if there isn't one. And then I guess my question then would be, do you have any guesses as to why there isn't any sort of roadmap for the Unthank sections? Do you think it's because it's just too, or it's been traditionally too wacky for people, or people just are, yeah, do you have
Yeah, so
any
you
thoughts?
so you're serving up the softball for the distribution rant right from the start. So let's get into it. Here
Sure.
is here here's where my thoughts lie. Um, I think for one, I think that there probably are, again, I think there is this sort of critical analysis going on, but it's within a different space than within the public sphere. Like there's different worlds of like reading groups or classifications, and within the academic or like that part of the world, there probably is a number of essays and like long form like critical analysis that really does make everything more comprehensible, and involves a lot of like the symbolism, sort of tracks and does certain things. A lot of that kind of critical analysis within academia, though, is generally restricted to academics and to people within that field. Like we have, it's some of those things can be totally readable and comprehensible to the larger public, but for the most part, they become very specialized and within like critical journals that you just don't come across.
So just to clarify, when you're talking about roadmaps, you're talking about academic
I
critical analysis in that sense, as opposed to like blog posts with people, like a Lanark Reddit where people are hashing out what they think happened.
Right.
Okay,
Yes.
okay.
So I think that within the academic sphere, I think that exists. Although I was going through, I had brought with me the review of contemporary fiction about Alistair Gray, and there's a
Mhm.
couple things on Lanark in there, but like none of them really like do what I'm asking for either. Like most of the essays are about. There's one about work in the book, the relationship to work and like sort of the politics, and then there's like the interview, and then there's pieces by him, and then it talks about some of his other books. But there's not really like, okay, let's talk about what this. Let's at least give you a framework, which is the point of this. So academia might have something like that. There must be, but it's like on like general, just I am a reader. I came across this book. I listened to this podcast. I'm jumping in looking for something, Googling it, hitting all these like various like normal like Guardian, New York Times sort of reviews, none of them really give you much. Like the one that comes up first is the introduction to this book, which I went back and I started reading. I was like, wait, I've read this. And I was reading it as a review. I was like, God, this review fucking blows. And then I was like, oh my God, this is the intro to the book. Like it's the guy who's just like, hey, when I was 22, I wrote a book and then I got to review this. And aren't I so cool? And I like shat on this part of it because I still don't think it's good. There's also a thread through many of the reviews in which it says a somewhat successful book. It always says like a flawed but interesting book. Like it's like it always has like a little shade as if like the four parts, the seams between the four parts are so like there that they're just like it doesn't work. Like something about this doesn't work. Blah blah blah. And that's the part that I think should exist. The other thing that came up with this that I think is really interesting within so I'm really focusing on just the like common reader access to material. Leave aside academic stuff. I grant that exists. I don't know what it is yet. I'll try and find it. But with this general, like I looked for Lanark in Reddit right now, and I'm not seeing anything. But that would be like, oh, there's like a post. Does anybody read Lanark? Blah blah blah. Like there's not really like anything super like a thread. There's not like a subreddit, none of that kind of stuff.
Let's get her going.
You should. There's one that's just called I just finished reading Lanark and I would like to start a discussion on this book since I liked it so much. And then there's a few people, there's a documentary about him, but there's like then they start talking about poor things. It is literally 6 posts. Like so there's just not a lot of discussion around that, which is interesting. The other thing that comes up within these common reviews is sort of a dismissal of the reader. Like you're not going to understand this anyways. Like this is weird. It's not, it's difficult. It's so confusing because the pages or the books are out of order, which if I see that one more time, I think I'm going to fucking flip out. Like it's not even that crazy. Again, this is the same thing from Sound and the Fury. This is not fucking rocket science. Like it's fine, guys. It's fine. Like it's like nobody's ever watched like Memento or like any fucking movie that like I feel like most of the reviewers of this are like the sort of like stereotypical partner that you turn on a movie and the person's like, whoa, what's happening? And you're like, well, or why did they do this? You're like, that's what the movie's gonna explain. Like let it be.
Wait, have you actually seen Memento?
Yeah.
Okay, I couldn't remember if it was Memento or something else, or another one of the other movies you hadn't seen. I was going to say bold statement for someone who.
It's backwards. I like the one I like more is the one that's backwards that involves this very harrowing sexual assault scene with Monica Bellucci. I can't think of the name of that movie right now, but it's got the same sort of structural technique. But I think it's I liked it a little bit more. But they have a lot of like dismissal of the reader. Essentially, like this is going to be very complex. Good luck. It's weird. It doesn't. What does this allegory even mean? Is Duncan Thaw and Lanark the same person or not? Like, what is Unthank Glasgow? I don't know. Blah blah blah. Who's gonna figure it out? Nobody knows. And this ties into the distribution rant that I want to make. So I'm shoehorning this, but a little bit. But there's like a true disrespect in society right now towards like attempts at creative art. That is outside of the conventions. So we have like the 21st, the 100 books, best books of the 21st century comes out from the New York Times. It's a list. It's a list is a list is a list. Who cares? Like you can criticize it very easily because it's pretty fucking pat. Like it's middle, every book through. Like there's nothing on there that you're like, holy shit, they like this book? It's like, yep, okay, Elena Ferrante, Berto Bolaño, George Saunders, like Emily St. John Mandel. But like there's like bad books on there, but there's nothing that's like, what the fuck? Like this is wild. Everything's middle. And we then have like a sort of this is maybe getting too much into like the business side of it, but the whole structure that we exist within in publishing is to prop up things that are pretty conventional and mainstream and pretty standard. We want it to be like super easy, comprehensible, down the middle of the plate, available for this mainstream audience. The second that you do anything that's creative, people fucking reject it. So I am specifically talking about the 2 books that we've been talking about on this podcast, several episodes, which are Attila by Javier Serena and Attila by Alyosha Cole. And they do, I believe, tie into this specifically. So I know this is going far afield, but grant me like a little bit of a digression and a second here to look for this. But in in this section of the book that we read for today, in the first part that's about Duncan, where he's like, essentially what happens to Duncan is he wants to finish his mural. The it's all gonna be torn down. The church is gonna go away, but he still wants to finish it. And he constantly says, like, where's the one I'm looking for specifically? But he's here it is. Later, he said, I apologize, Mr. Rennie. I don't believe that. I believe this church will be knocked down, but first the mural must be made perfect. When a thing is perfect, it is eternal. It can be destroyed afterward or slowly decay, but its perfection is safe in the past, which is the only inevitable part of the universe. No government, no force, no God can make what has been not have been. He also says at one point in time that he switched on the lights. What's that?
They're great lines, by the way. I underlined them.
Yeah, and then like a few pages later, he switched on the lights and stared at the mural. It looked horrible. On that paragraph, his mural showed the warped rat trap world of a neurotic virgin. And this really strikes home, having just finished reading Attila and working on Attila by Alyosha Cole, in which he labored over trying to make a perfect, crazy, difficult, inventive, philosophical book. Constantly rewriting it, constantly trying to retweak it, constantly trying to make this thing be a scaffolding and edifice of artistic work. So we are publishing that book. We are publishing simultaneously a book also called Attila by Javier Serena, who has written a book, Last Words on Earth, about Roberto Bolaño. It's based on a Roberto Bolaño character. And this one is based on Alyosha Cole and investigates the idea of someone like Duncan Thaw, who is dedicated to the art at the expense of everything else. This book, Duncan Thaw and Alyosha Cole have they're not the same people, but there's just similarities between them in terms of that as artists, they're dedicated to this art at the expense of their health frequently. Like they're just not concerned with like money or practical matters. It is an art for art's sake sort of vibe. And Attila goes through, and Javier Serena's Attila goes through and explains like this guy's sort of life in his last bits, his like last years of his life, why he's striving for this, what he's doing, and essentially his ultimate failure because nobody does the book. Now, my distribution rant, which is just like consortium catches strays here, but like fuck them, is that they insist that by bringing out these two books that have the same name, one about a character and the book written by that character is completely incomprehensible to you, dear reader. All you readers out there who like this podcast, read open letter books or Delkey Archive books or transit books or New Directions books, or work in a bookstore that might contain things that are not fucking Elena Ferrante and like whoever else has been coronated by the New York Times, that actually have like books outside of the mainstream, that you're too fucking stupid to understand these two books, their relationship, and that they're two separate books.
You're never going to find them. Good luck, guys. You're never going to find them.
You are too fucking stupid to figure this out. That's the attitude among the artistic enterprise right now. Like the system that is talking about literature and art in I think in almost every medium is basically like, you're too dumb. Like, and that I find this very reprehensible, and consortium underscored it in such a dire way for me. Like the New York Times thing was already, I'm writing about it a little bit. I don't really care about it. I've only looked at the list for like 40 seconds because I was just like, well, it's just going to be dumb. Like, I know it's going to be here. And it's all that. Like, they've got the worst Jan Fosse book on there, for instance. Like, it's just like the wrong choices with some of the right names generally. There are like Bolaño. There are books I really like on there, but there's a lot of stuff where it's just like, oh, okay, wow, you picked the book that came out from Random House by that author. Cool. That's really interesting. You're not like in the pocket for big publishing at all. But like all of this is so degrading. And like there's also like no, even within the reviews of Lanark, where it's like, this is confusing, blah, blah, blah. It's always like, well, you're not really going to get it or like it. Like instead of like taking like ownership of like the art is good, maybe I don't understand it, but I could figure it out. It's always just sort of like, well, if you don't get it, it's not, nobody's going to understand it. Fuck it. It's too confusing. Blah, 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 let's go on. And I'm just becoming more and more offended by this, but specifically that consortium is telling booksellers and our audience they're too fucking stupid to understand something that is clearly an artistic project, a conceptually artistic project. And to put a pin in this, because they'll never listen to this, because I guarantee they won't, is that They shouldn't exist to criticize their clients. We pay them to help us fulfill our artistic enterprise. We pay them 43% of all the money we receive, 43% to help us put our artistic actions into the world as much as possible. And they say, well, you can't do that. That's impossible.
Yeah, whereas
We can't figure this out at all. They're too dumb to figure that out. That's not what I'm paying you for. I'm not
no.
paying you to be a fucking naysayer. I'm paying you to figure out your shit. And I can say that they don't do a good job at any part of it. Logistically, they can't get books places. They couldn't get Solenoid to Dublin for the literature award that it won. I mean, what are they doing? You're supposed to be a warehouse. Do your goddamn job. Get after it. Okay, their rant done, but fuck them.
But it is a good point that, you know, we're the customer. We're not the service provider. So if the customer is coming to you and saying, we have this artistic project, we have this conceptual 2-volume, 2 different books thing, both have the same title. Yes, both have the same title. Their response should not be, "Ooh, I don't know about that." Their response should be, "We'll look into how we can make sure that that idea is implemented in the best way possible."
Let's just reiterate that the one of the dumbest things I heard them say is that they said we should add a subtitle to the Alyosha Cole book that just says Attila epilogue, which might be the worst suggestion I've ever heard. Like it's right up there with
I
like
was very confused by that one. I was
that was
confused by
like
that one.
okay, in what way would how epilogue? Fucking so stupid. Okay, let's talk about this book. Enough of Ingram Consortium bashing. But if you guys want to come at me, come at me. That we pay you so much money. I don't deserve to feel like the creative enterprises that we put together are just like too hard to understand, and for you to dismiss and diss on our readership.
Yeah,
Fucking, I shore up for that. Like,
we're not
no
happy.
way.
Chad is an unhappy customer.
I will not stand for you insulting our readers and our booksellers. Will not. So take it. So Duncan, he works on his mural. He does a lot of mural.
You already read the part, but that was one of the other things that I underlined or marked. I love where basically the drunk lights come on his mural and he's like, "Oh fuck, it's too bright."
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
"Oh, what have I done?" Like, yeah, like don't turn the lights on in the church. Religion is best experienced in a shadowy haze. But just the drunk lights aspect of it, of like, "Last call, bitches."
Yep, yep.
No, no.
Oh man. So his little we didn't have that many. There's only like 2 chapters actually, The Way Out and Surrender, that were part of that. No, there's 3, isn't there? No, just Way Out and then Surrender are the 2 that we didn't talk about last week.
Mhm.
But we had talked last week about like the sort of like low level incel pilling that's going on throughout this, where he's constantly like being dismissed by women. It's like, and he's like, they don't show up for dates. They just don't let him like paint them. They're like, oh, like things came up. He's like constantly being rejected to the point where like he's looking at is it a yeah, there's a what do you call it? Like a poster for a film, like a
This is my one of my other favorite lines.
absolutely. Uh, so he's looking at it. There's a woman on there. She had short, dark hair and lips like June Haig. She was barefoot and wore bangles and black gauze trousers with a slit from ankle to waist. A sleeveless black gauze shirt covered her breasts, but left bare the valley between them and her throat and midriff. Stealthily arising, his sexual imagination began slowly to rip and toy with her, but he crumpled the paper and flung it aside, thinking, women are never like that. Or they seem to be, and then stop touching me, Duncan. But that's my fault. I've seen them with other men at bus stops, leaning towards them, looking into their faces, nakedly wanting to be liked or happy because they see that they're wanted. But I'm unattractive. Never mind. Prostitutes make a living from men like me. I must go to Bath Street. Put my big line through that. I can read it. So he goes. So this is the part that I alluded to. So he goes to get a prostitute. He's like, finally, like, fuck it, man. I give up. Like this, I am not gonna make it with like a regular woman in my school, blah, blah, gets the prostitute. They go back to the house, the apartment. It's going to cost him a fortune. And then she sees his eczema on his scrotum and is like, I'm out.
She's like,
Dang.
yeah, she doesn't even want his money. He like leaves her $3 conciliatory and she's like, ew, fucking take that with you.
I can't afford to take these chances. It's eczema. It isn't infectious. Look, no, you don't. Stop.
No.
So then,
Which a little bit later when they're talking, when they're back in the ward and they're talking about Sludden, and he's like, "Well, why were all of you women like all over Sludden all the time?" And they're like, "Well, he was like fine enough, and also he's the only one who didn't have any STDs."
yeah, basically, like,
So just pass around the cleanest boy. Like that's how that works.
so so to end Duncan's story, because this is important for maybe trying to piece together these parts. The prostitute rejects him. He gets fucking blitz drunk, right? Goes by the necropolis in Glasgow, sees people on a rim. I don't think, unless I'm missing
Does
something,
he get drunk? I thought that this was like more fever illness.
it could be fever illness, but he's already pretty wasted, isn't he? Like again read this like a week ago, so I didn't look back
I
through all
didn't
the
think
parts.
I thought that he was just like, so he
Sick.
went to the because he went to a tea house, I thought.
Oh yeah, it's the next morning. Yeah, he goes to the tea room. The doctor tells him blah blah blah. He's sick or he's whatever he is. He goes by the necropolis. There's a lot of people watching him. He shut his eyes and imagined her, and the her I don't think is defined here, is it?
I mean, no, but I sort of think that her and Marjorie are interchangeable.
Marjorie, or it could be June though too. Like the
Yeah, but there's all that like obsessive, like Marjorie comes in with whoever the man is. I don't know who
oh
she
right.
comes in with, but comes into the church, and that kind of like sets him off spiraling again, where he's like fine to a point, like manic in his art and in his artwork. And then as soon as Marjorie comes back in, he starts again being like, how was I so obsessed with her? It's so stupid. And then he spends the next like 20 pages just again downward spiraling.
Yeah. So regardless of who what it is, someone so it says Thaw shut his eyes and imagined her descending the streets like a water drop sliding down the side of a
Mhm.
basin. Then he walked over the bridge and he met her at Paisley's corner. She smiled and took his arm, and he was competent. He grinned to see himself shift his arm to her waist as they walked, and how his remarks made her giggle. He flapped and tumbled in the air above their heads, helpless and screeching with laughter, then brought his beak close to an ear and made suggestions. They climbed a narrow road. I'm going to read this whole paragraph because this is key. They climbed a narrow road between staring crowds. Sometimes he recognized a face to the left or the right, but he had to keep his whole attention on Marjorie. Here we go. Marjorie, feeding her with the talk, which made her smile, and being careful not to laugh. She did not notice that the hand holding hers was as senseless as granite and prevented by an effort from crushing her finger bones. They crossed the rocking planks of the canal bridge, passed some warehouses, and climbed a grassy slope. Thaw went first, pulling her behind. She was laughing when he forced her down and rubbed her body and neck with his stone hands. She struggled. Quick, 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 screamed the crow. Cut her off, quick. He moved his stone mouth across her throat, into the angle of the jaw near the ear, and cut her off, quick. He woke in the drizzling rain, paragraph break, woke in the drizzling rain with a crust on his lips and something beside him he did not want to see. He attempted to fly home, but was too breathless to do so for more than short distances. Otherwise, he climbed up the slimy towpath. He grunted louder and louder until a policeman broke the lock on the door. He expected to go to prison, but a doctor was there and they lifted and laid him in bed. The doctor gave him a morphine injection and he fell into a sweet sleep. He woke in the Southern General Hospital and was nearly a fortnight there. So then we flip back. So we've been having again these two parts, book one and book two, have been part of the Oracle telling Lanark of his past before he arrived there. And so then we flip from
Mhm.
that moment where it seems like Duncan has maybe killed someone, maybe killed Marjorie, that is. And instead of going to prison, ends up in a hospital. And Lanark's like, wait, did he kill her? And they're like, that's why we saw it.
I have that in the margin too, where I was like, so yes or no, and then like the first line in the next book is just Leonard going,
Yeah. Like,
so
what?
what?
Was
But so are we moving past that Duncan part? That part was so confusing to me. And I mean, I was trying to read it last night after the long day and like winding down. And so I did start to think that I was maybe misunderstanding things, but because like he goes back to, I don't know, his house after the tea room.
mm-hmm.
And maybe you can get maybe you can get alcohol and tears, and he goes up to some house and then he passes out on the rug, and then it's like he wakened in the air above his body, so I thought all of that was like him sort of hallucinating. Anyway,
Or being like disembodied, like some sort of break,
yeah.
like almost like a psychotic break.
Yeah, yeah, and that's also where, like, he starts climbing, and then there's, like, the crow and the whispering and all that, and I did it so I forgot to look it up, yesterday or the day before, but I looked at it briefly this morning, so I put, like, schizophrenia, BPD, drugs in the, margins, and because I was interested in looking up what Aleister Gray's, um, own history with illness, and there's a brief thing I found where, like, asthma and eczema were things that he had, but um, in terms of, you know, any psychotic breaks or mental health issues, I didn't get to dig that deep. So I was curious if, like, how many drug trips he's taken or how many breaks he himself has had because it's, um,
You're trying to read off the authorial background into a character. That's like pretty big like
well,
fallacy there.
so so I've never taken hallucinogens. I've never had, other than postpartum depression, never had any mental health issues or concerns. So I don't know, but this seems like it seems so this is the craziest part of the Duncan narrative. Like this is where it does start to like feed back into the Lanark. And I think you were saying that where it does start to get back into that like hole, like mouth hole in the ground, very chaotic, but there's still an organization to it, and that's why it made me think, you know, going back to the cliches of write what you know. And I mean, he's writing asthma, he's writing eczema. Is he also writing mental health? Is he also just, or is he is like there are drugs later? Drugs do come later,
Yeah,
a little bit later, which I'm curious. I don't understand what those are. Tornado pills, like
the
I
ones that
don't.
he takes in the car that the
Yeah,
woman.
yeah, that the woman
Yeah, the pink torpedo-shaped pellets in it.
torpedo pills. Yes. Um, so like it seems more formed. Like if I were to try to write something, try to write some hospital scenes or like psychotic break scenes or mental breakdown scenes, it would not be this intense, I don't think. And if it were this intense, it would be untethered in a way that I'm not being facetious or making a pun. Like it would just be disorganized and untethered. And this seems to have a very like nearly methodical or
Yeah.
heavier weighted sense to it, and that's why I'm curious. I mean, that's why I was just curious of whether, Aleister Gray had any history, personal history,
I
or
don't know that that matters. I think what matters is he has a good history of writing well.
fuck you, fuck you.
No, I know what you mean. Like I don't know anything about that related to him. I don't know anything about his life aside from like the things that we've talked about, but I know what you're saying. But I think that outside of like the personal experience, his ability to write it is like what truly is the masterpiece of it. Like
Mhm.
whether it's like a real life experience or not, or like based on like his personal drug experiences or psychotic breaks, the ability to render it in here I think is far more valuable. And I don't think even if
Yeah.
like you had those experiences, that doesn't enable you to like be able to craft something that has this
No, and I'm not arguing that this makes or breaks that section, it just makes me curious.
yeah. Yeah, I don't know. Like I haven't looked up his like biography. There is a according to this Reddit thing, there is a whatchamacallit, bio or a YouTube thing about him that
Mm,
I could watch. So, but no, not to shit on your point. I agree with you. I just think that like the part that's like important about it to me is that it's written in a way that like is both realistic in there, but also in that slippery like space where you're not sure what's going on. And I
mm,
think the part that I was going to say that's important about that is that when we go back in beginning chapter 30, surrender on 350, when Lanark is like, wait, did he kill someone or not? The article's like, I'm only able to tell the story as he saw it. But did the police arrest him? No. In hospital, he kept vaguely expecting them to, but they didn't come, which worried him. He wanted to get away from everything he knew, and arrest would have made that easy. Oh, then it was a hallucination. Not necessarily. In
mhm.
1956, there were 150 officially recognized murders in Britain, a third of them unsolved. Which is also like one of the things that I think Aleister Gray does that is interesting is that there is like there some of the criticisms in the reviews I was reading are like how thin the female characters are, that they're really not that fully developed. They're two-dimensional at best. There's usually like his books 1882 Janine and Something Letter are like pretty pervy and like very like sexualized. And yet like Poor Things movie and book is pretty much like a feminist, very feminist like sort of representation, very feminist book, very feminist work of art. And a lot of this does quite acknowledge like this sort of like male toxicity and like the incel thing, and raises that and allows it to be on the surface. Like it's not like an anti. It's not celebrating Duncan Thought like murdering someone.
No,
It's
not
actually,
at
in
all.
fact, bringing attention to the fact that like there were a ton of murders that were just unsolved. So, and most likely by people like this, even if Duncan
Yeah.
Thought didn't do it, there are these people that exist in society, and this is not great. I don't
Mhm.
know if Aleister Gray killed anyone. I didn't look that up in his bio, but he does a good job of
Yeah, I didn't try that search either.
describing.
I know he had asthma and eczema. I know his mother died of cancer. Um,
I I also from that same section, let's get to book 4. But as we sort of segue back and forth, there are two things. One, just that Duncan gets treated with cortisone steroids, which is my thing. I love it. I want cortisone so bad. I want it all over my body, but especially my knees. And then 351 has a part that I think is going to be incredibly is like going to point towards the future. So when the Oracle goes on, he's talking about how he thought of going to London, decides to visit his father after all. Then the next paragraph, consider him passing along the route described at the start of book 1, chapter 18, only he dozes most away as he gets out of Glencoe Village. The Oracle is referencing the book we're reading at this point now.
yeah,
Which
yeah.
that metafictional thing note should be just put a button on it as that happens right here. And then to wrap up this section, he wanders around, he meets the woman in the car, who's like, here's the crazy pills, they'll get you high, give it a
Of
couple
course, an
days.
American.
Well, he steps into a detached part of America. I assume that like that's both the characters America and also like the reference to the car. The seats seem upholstered in soft buffalo hide. The climate is 5 degrees above skin heat. Somewhere a tiny orchestra is playing. Um, somebody saw that all as like she's American, and also like this car, the representation of like a big giant car driving along
Mhm,
with a driver.
mhm. Here,
Here's
have some drugs.
yeah,
Come in our
here's some
car.
drugs. There's so like listen like the last line after a while Thaw says he's going to stir. The lady says you may find Henry a little taciturn. There's a blood clot in President Eisenhower's brain, and the market's responding badly. Like it's also a little nonsensical.
I mean, in the current climate, I thought that was a funny statement because it gave me pause to think, I'm not disinterested or apathetic to politics, but I also don't live a life where my mood is wholly dependent on the market
Yeah.
or like the sitting president's state of health. And so that um like clearly, yeah, I thought that was interesting.
So the last part, sort of getting long here, is that he then drowns himself, presumably.
Presumably, yeah.
And that I'm trying to find where it is in here, but I believe when he writes his little story about how he came to Unthank, back when they're like, "Oh, you should be a writer," and he's like, "Okay." The first thing I remember is a thumping sound. Blah 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 blah. Where is it? I'm pretty sure. I'm pretty sure, although I could be mistaken, that when he starts writing about his arrival there, that he has like sand in his pockets. Like there's a reference to seashells or sand, which would circle back into like this being like a drowning.
Yeah, or at least or at least a slapping around of waves. Um, because isn't there no, is it this doesn't it say that he's like brought into something? Or no, it doesn't, does it? It just goes right back to it just goes right back to Lanark. Yeah, speaking of the sand, I have it's a very short list, but I did start making a list of things that I had no recollection of, starting with what Duncan's dad, like I remember that he left, but what Duncan's dad was going to go do, because then he finds him in this hostel and is like sitting with maybe a new family. Like, what does Duncan's dad do? Who the fuck is Nan? Who's Nancy?
Nan was the one that I literally, the first note in that part is, he started blankly. Rima said, "It's Nancy. Don't you remember Nan?" And I put I don't.
Yeah, I put nope. I put nope in the margins. Sorry, Nan. And
She
did
was
not
one of the
remember
people that get the loot, though.
did not remember that Rima was pregnant by the end of their.
Did we know that? I don't remember that.
I
I
think initially I thought that he was referring to an abortion, but I think I might be conflating that with a show or a movie that we watched recently where it might be Letterkenny, where Tanis, I don't know, but just the way like he says something, Lanark says something toward the end of the section where he's like, "Oh, sure, like, how's the baby doing?" And it seemed very biting, and she's like, "You're never gonna let me forget about that, are you?" And so I thought that was pointing back to, her having gotten an abortion.
I
But I just don't remember at this point. I don't
honestly don't
remember.
remember either. Like, it's at that point where it's like that was far enough before and so different that it's out of, because like yeah, God, you're right. Like, I don't remember. We should look back. We should,
Yeah.
someone can tell us. Someone in the comments tell us, please.
We're the
You got a supporter. William Gass, the William Gass, is saying that you're not wondering if he's a good writer. I said, I know, I'm just giving you shit. But like,
at least someone understands me.
someone understands. You've got fans. You got
I've got
fans. Got understanding. People loving it. People loving the takes. I can't remember either, because the thing with Rima in the Institute before was when she was in with the, what was it called, that dragon hide?
Yeah, Dragonhide.
Was it dragon hide?
Yeah.
The dragon hide, and then explodes or whatever their thing is, and then becomes like the person, and they don't want to eat the other humans, so they eat like their own food, and they have that conversation. And I feel like you're right that there was like a reference to her being pregnant then, but it seems like when it comes up here that he's surprised by it as well.
Yeah. Like it's, I mean, because they do they do some rolling around in the metaphorical hay in the hospital. And God, there's so much in this book, and so much of this book that you can draw connections to. Like I said, Letterkenny, like all these things that we're watching and consuming concurrently that you can draw these draw these connectors to. So they were rolling around hanky panky, and then maybe there was a point where she was like, "Oh, I'm pregnant now." It's like, I don't know. I'd have to.
Yeah. One of the weird problems of doing this particular form of this podcast, which we are going to experiment with some other things in the future, just as like a little teaser for anyone watching or listening, but is that when a book is this long and this complicated, it's easy to forget where you were. Because like that section that you'd be talking about, we read like 6 weeks ago. Just like a crazy thing. But yeah, so okay, for book 4 though, did you look at the opening, I don't know what you call it, the frontispiece, the drawing?
Yes, and I spent a very long time trying to figure out if the guy has chest hair or people. And I think it's people. It's
Yeah.
people on his chest, but initially I was like, I've only one other time in my life have I seen someone who's actually that hairy in real life, and it's when I ran a half marathon, humble brag. But the guy who was running, one of the people who was running near me, I at first was like, who wears a velour shirt to a half marathon? And then I looked closer and I was like, oh fuck, he's just like wrist to shoulders to waist, just back and chest. He was very well equipped with body hair.
Okay. Yeah, God, that's
But
disgusting.
but I did look at it. A magnifying glass would be more helpful as well, because there's a lot. There's a lot.
There's a lot going on in this photo, but or in this drawing, but the words, just to define it for anyone who doesn't have it in front of you and you are watching on YouTube, here is the picture that we're talking about. So there's a guy over top wearing with like a scepter and a sword crown.
Mhm,
Um, People embodied him. I think it should be people because I think this is a representation of government. So by arts is formed that great mechanical man called a state, foremost of the beasts of the earth for pride.
mhm.
And then the sword says force, and that is a scepter, right? I don't know if I'm right about that. Anyways, whatever.
Yeah, and,
Staff says
what's
persuasion.
what's interesting, if you look closer, so on the force side, it's soldiers marching with what looks like bayonets or that sort of thing,
Yes,
and the persuasion part is just like a bunch of women.
a classroom.
Oh my gosh, you're right, there's a teacher, but everyone's or no, it's a preacher because everyone's down on their knees.
I thought they're sitting in desks because it looks like he's describing a triangle, like geometry. And
Oh,
And then the one below that I cannot see. And then the one on the left, below the soldiers with bayonets looks like natural destruction of some sort. It's like someone's running with their arms thrown up as if there's like an earthquake. And then in
mm.
between it says the matter, form, and power of a commonwealth.
Oh, that's a
So,
comma. I thought that was the number 9.
oh, I think it looks to me like a
It's a
comma, but
comma.
like
It's a
this
comma,
is
you're
really,
right.
I mean, I have bad eyesight, but this is really intricately hard to
Oh, yeah,
pull
there's
apart. Like all
oh,
the
oh, 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 okay. I see. So you're talking about the teacher
Yeah,
there. I'm
yeah.
talking about on on, uh on Lanark Momoa's arms here.
Oh.
So, like, that's a bunch of
Oh.
people, and this arm
Yes.
shoot, I can't do the reverse, the reflected. This is not where my brain is at this morning, but the sword one has a bunch of soldiers with, like,
Oh.
bayonets, and then this one, persuasion, has
People on their knees, now I can see
and
that.
there is, like, a teacher, preacher, but I didn't even see the ones down there.
Oh, yeah, I thought you were talking about because there's bayonets right there too.
Oh, yeah, yeah, because there are.
That's the first thing I went to when you said that.
That's probably right. I
So
didn't even look that
so
far.
if we use these as, like, sort of a like, I don't think we talked about this the right way when we talked about it with Brian and I did one of these alone, and we talked about the picture for, book 2 in which man
Mhm.
is baked and eaten by himself, but at the time, we hadn't I don't think had gotten to the part where, like, they're eating people in the institute,
Yep,
like
there it
like,
is. Mhm.
there's that, and so these are sort of, like, good, like, frames for, like, what's gonna come next, and I suspect that this book 4, based on, like, some of the things that happen at the beginning some of the things that happen at the beginning, that this is about the building of a government and a state and, like, people's rights and, like, what sort of the governing principles are for,
Mhm.
like, a whole society, and
Mhm.
so if the book somehow splitting it up, the book 1 and or book 2 and book 3, the Duncan Thaw sections, book 1 and book 2, god damn it, the 2 books about Duncan Thaw are like the realistic, like individual, going through society, trying to be an artist, thwarted by work, by all that kind of stuff, by not finding love, so on and so forth. Then maybe books 3 and book 4 are about society and government, and like can be like a larger piece, all of
Mhm.
which kind of fits into Duncan's life, which he doesn't achieve heaven, he doesn't achieve perfection, he doesn't create his mural, dies, and then this is his limbo slash hell.
Mhm.
Um, and so what happens in the section that we read like a chunk of book 4.
So
Nancy arrives, she's pregnant. They're like, "How did you get here?" Because we weren't allowed to like bring anything with us. And she's like, "Oh, it's no big deal." Um, there's just
but
a hole opened up. It's
but
fine.
then she's someone who, like, when Monsieur whatever, the priest was like, "Go and tell people to stay away, and if they come, to come willingly," I think. And
Yeah,
so and she just, like, walked in with her baby and her body full of mouths, which
that
okay, toxic mess, like, "Oh, no, a little eczema," and the women are like, "Ew," but then, like, a woman's covered her body's covered in mouths, and, like, Slutton's, like, singing to them and, like, making cute with them. Like, it's of course he's not bothered by a body full of mouths.
no. In fact, that's a
dirty.
pretty dirty section. I began to grow
Yeah.
malice, not just in my face, but in other places. And when I was alone, they argued and shouted and screamed at me. Sledden was very good with them. He could always get them singing in tune. And when we slept together, he even made me glad of them. He said he'd never known a girl who could be pierced in so many places.
Yep, there it is.
All
Um,
about holes in this particular
a
book.
lot, yeah, again with the holes.
But that okay, so, like, with the government thing, if we're gonna ride that line for 1 second, what
Mhm.
361 is another part of that, where he's like, "You see, I was pregnant and Sludden wouldn't allow me to get near enough to tell him. When I managed it at last, he grew very serious. He said it was a crime to bring children into the world before it had been redeemed by revolution." This comes up again when they're in the council and they go to what is the guy's name? Monbodden or fucking some
Monbodo,
Monbodo,
which
which is wonderful.
which is the slogan, the signs that the people are caring about. That should just be if we started doing T-shirts for this podcast, the way that like how did this get made?
This
That
is my line of the week.
yeah, okay, then I won't say it. I won't say it.
100%.
Um,
100%.
but I do want to point out really quickly, like you mentioned, going back to when you mentioned that this or that Poor Things and maybe this book in some ways is well, this book not so much in like the women forward, but definitely of like toxic masculinity and men suck and are problematic. But at the very beginning of part 4, um, chapter 31, Nan, where Lanark's like, so did he kill someone? What's going on? And Rima's like, what are you talking about? And he's like, well,
Oh, yeah.
everything the oracles just said. And she's basically like, babe, the oracle's a woman, and this is my story.
Yeah.
You fell asleep and you've
Yeah.
been dreaming all this shit. It's
Although
like,
that
wow.
so that actually is another thing. So that sort of oh, what's what I'm looking for? Like the parallax view of things. So does he kill someone or not? Like, and they're like, well, it could have been a hallucination, could have not. There's like two ways that's how he saw it, and
Mhm,
that may not be true. And then the fact that the oracle for Rima is a female telling her story, and for Lanark has been a male telling Duncan's story,
mhm,
then relates to when they finally leave the institute. So they go and they appeal to leave together, because you can only leave as a couple, which is, I think, part of this. Like, here's some parts of society bits. Like you can escape from this if you're a couple. So
yeah,
they leave. They're going to leave as a couple. They do mention in that part was I was going to refer to. They're like, well, we're going to be taking over Unthank, so don't worry about it. We're annexing it and destroying it and using like the people that are there for food and energy. So fuck them. You're not going to be there anyways. But they're like, the only thing that could stop that is there's a revolution here in the institute. So like that comes up twice in a pretty quick succession.
mhm,
But when they leave, they walk along this road that's divided by a yellow line, and on one side, one of them is going uphill, the other one is going downhill on the other side, and the only way for them to continue walking is to like hold hands and help each other on their upward downwards ascent. Like again, it's two different things happening in the same place as two different people at the same reality plane. And I think that that also is like one of the interesting things about the book, where it can be sliced apart from those different angles, or is trying to do that, trying to allow for those things to exist.
mhm.
But yeah, that the so yeah, I don't know what else. The Manbaden thing is crazy. Like when they go in and they're just like, we want to go, and they're like, okay, you can go, sure, whatever. And he's like, but I want to go somewhere with sun. And they're like, yeah, no, you have to go to Unthank first. You can eventually get to Brovan, but like not right
Can
away. You have to wait
can
till
we get a ride? Nope, you're walking.
nope, you have to walk. And
That's
so
just how
eh, they do reference their kind of like government things at some
mhm,
points in here. Um, there's a mural, that there's first a mural on page 366 that's basically like on the dome with angels and trumpets scattering blossoms, figures on clouds, four ponderous horsemen, some puffs of cumulus. They wore Roman armor, curly wigs, and laurel wreaths. And when he asks about them, whoever this is it Monroe? Monroe says, oh, it's an 18th century convention. The mural was painted then. The men facing them are former directors of the Institute: Prometheus, Pythagoras, Aquinas, and Descartes. The figure on the throne is the first Lord Monboddo. And that's where like I think like that, like when we look at that that first picture, and there's like the little teaching thing, and it's
mhm,
got like the world and like the triangle, made me think of Pythagoras, and like the kind of like nature of knowledge, or types of knowledge, and like structuring this kind of ruling Lord Monbodo, like the rule of the institute around whatever these kind of pillars of knowledge and ideas are. Um, so then they're going to go to Provo, but they have to go Provon, but they have to Provo would be funny. Like
That would
unintentional.
be quite the swerve, yeah.
We're all heading to Utah.
Mhm.
Um, and I know that we're running kind of late on time here. But they leave, they walk, they're trying to get there. They have so many. This is the part that's like this surreal strangeness that I would usually just be like, oh, come on, I'm sort of tired of this. Like they walk, they end up at the same door. Maybe it's not the same door. There's a giant wheel in the road. They finally get picked up by a guy who like wants to hump Rima. So he's like, okay, I'll give you a ride. And she's like, I like this guy. I got, this is good. I can get us to Unthank. He drives them along for a while, and then they get rid of him, and he dies instantly in a car crash, which Rima takes ownership of, and I approve of this section thoroughly, which is like, I got bored of him,
Yeah,
so I decided he should die.
yeah.
I am a witch, and I deserve this for killing him. What are you talking about, Rima? After a moment, she said, pregnant, silent, freezing, all dark, lost with you, feet that might fall off, an aching back. I deserve all of this. He was driving badly to impress me. He wanted me, you see, and at first I found that fun. Then I got tired of him. He was so smug and sure of himself. When he made us get out, I wanted him to die, so he went on driving badly and crashed. No wonder you mean lock me up in a hospital. I'm a witch.
Get it, girl.
Own that. Yeah,
Get it.
right on.
I'm
Love
I'm
it.
pregnant, I'm aching. I deserve so much more. Fuck yes, you do. You fucking do. You're carrying life. You take what's yours.
So they get saved in a sense. They go through like a tunnel. They find that a lot of this did remind me though that it's like the Bardo. And
Yeah.
that's where like there's if you're gonna interpret it as that he died and this is his afterlife, this is sort of a Bardo-like situation. Um
Okay, and that instantly, like as odd as it may seem to you or people watching or listening, as soon as you say Bardo, it takes away a level of readership anxiety from, or not anxiety, but restlessness, because this part of book 4 already, I was like, I don't like the Lanark sections compared to the Duncan sections. I
yeah.
really don't. But as soon as you compare it to the Bardo, that it contextualizes. The Bardo feels safe to me for because of Voladine, because of Voladine, really. Like the Bardo just feels like I get it. Now I can feel. So yeah, if you're struggling with this section, dear readers, dear listeners, just think of the Bardo.
Just
49 days, think of the Bardo.
49 days. So so they're gonna wander and they're not sure. Like they even say when you're gonna wander to Unthank, it could take a day, it could take many months, but it will be quick. But time doesn't pass the same way. The moon is always moving in a weird way. Lights come and go. They follow handle rails that once they leave, there's like ice holes. Like everything is like an ill-defined landscape in which in the Bardo stuff you meet variations of yourself or various things. Like the guy driving the car could be an instance of that.
Mhm.
The wheel, I don't know how to interpret that. I don't have an idea, but
Which to
yeah,
go
and then maybe
back,
the spider.
yes, the spider thing always. Which to go back, I don't know if you remember weeks ago now, but I did pose the question: how many times do you think Lanark/Duncan has been through this cycle?
Oh, yeah, you're right. You did bring that up.
Of like, if he's going through, so like Duncan didn't work. Okay, now he's Lanark. He's getting some prime information about what got him to the Lanark stage. And now he's in the Lanark stage. Yeah, so like, and
So
that's
it
I
says
don't
you end up being reborn at the end is like as a spider.
yeah.
Um,
Well, I've always thought about that because I don't know too much about the actual Bardo beyond our books, but um like, can you just sort of infinitely cycle through then? Is that the
the
foundational
reborn, like the
idea? So,
yeah.
like Duncan didn't work, so he's come back as Lanark, and he's given it his best shot, and if Lanark doesn't work, does he just get another shot? Like, this guy's I don't
Wait,
know. How many shots do you get?
you mean that within this book, or are you talking about like the Buddhist like Tibetan Book of the Dead
Yeah.
religious belief? I think within there you do go until you ascend to like a certain level of awareness and whatnot.
Lanark and Duncan ain't ascending. There's
And like they're mired in dragon skin or whatever.
right.
But like yeah, and like in the book, the Volodine book that you're referring to, Bardo. Wait, what is the title of it? Bardo or no Bardo?
Bardo or not Bardo.
Bardo or not Bardo. There are very like so much stuff about being stuck in the Bardo and going through and having these encounters. And then there's a great story where the person like doesn't want to be born as, isn't it a spider?
Oh, they the main role of the Bardo is like don't get distracted.
Yeah, don't get distracted.
Don't lose sight of the goal. And then the person's like, I got this. And then at the very, very end, they're like, ooh, what's that? And then they come back as a spider.
Yeah, the Volodine's loaded with spiders. When they saw the spider in here, that's the first thing I thought of and just wrote, fuck this on top of it. There's these signs that we could talk about that I think I had one question. So throughout this, there are 3 of these, I believe, of these big like roadmap signs that they run into that have New Cumbernauld or Imber and Unthank, and then the next one has Imber and Unthank. The thing that was confused by with this is why does it say CH37?
Chapter 37.
Right?
Yeah.
Okay, so we're gonna get to chapter 37 next week,
Hmm.
and I assume that's when they get to Unthank?
Yeah, go to 391, and that's where it splits off. And Unthank, Ember goes on, and Unthank brings you back to chapter 37,
So,
which
okay,
is
so
2
again,
chapters into the next chunk that we're reading.
exactly. There is one other thing that I don't know if there's anything you also want to add to this first for at the moment, but when I was reading some of these reviews, there's one that was like a science fiction website, and it was like, and I didn't really get it. I really didn't get the Duncan sections or the Lanark sections until page 410. Like it's like literally specifies page 410. So that's the section that we're reading next week too.
Yeah, we're not even
I
there
don't
yet.
I don't know if that's like a real if that was a joke or like there's something specific on page 410 or thereabouts. But I wonder
Yeah, I'm gonna
if
put a star at the top of that page.
your relationship to like not digging the Lanark sections is gonna be altered when we hit page 410.
When I understand it, yeah. Okay, I
Or
put an
like something
asterisk.
I have no idea. So
I put an asterisk at the top of that. We'll see if I remember what that means.
yeah. Yeah, yeah. So anything else from this? So I want to next week we're all in book 4, so we can really and
Mhm.
hopefully Brian will be here, so we'll be able to like really get into that part of it. And specifically, we're going up to page 454 for next week. So up to we go through chapter 38. Chapter 39 is called divorce. So we get up to divorce.
Wasn't the only one though, was it? I thought there was another chapter called divorce,
Oh, maybe.
or was I just thinking that because I thought that was funny? And maybe I just maybe Genesis.
Um,
Yeah, I must have flipped forward when I was looking
I
for
don't
something.
I don't see one in the table of contents, but
Oh, right. Okay, that was it. I do remember seeing that.
so yeah, so we go up to the to 454 for next week. We'll get way more into this like book 4 stuff and like where things are, I think, with and trying to make some sense out of that. I do one other bit that I just want to toss out there that I think is fun, as just like not my line of the week, but just a fun bit, is when they do meet the guy, uh wait, is it the driver? Yeah, I think it's the driver, and they're like, "Where's your? My boyfriend wants to write." He's like, "Why are you going to Unthank? My boyfriend wants to work there. What does he do? He's a painter and artist." Lanark yelled, "I'm not a painter, an artist, eh? Does he paint nudes? I'm not an artist." He just says thing over and over again, and then like on the next page, no, there's nothing much in Unthank. Imber's the place. Bright lights, strip clubs, Swedish massage, plenty of overtime for artists in Imber. Something for everybody. I'll show you around. I'm not an artist. I love that. But
There there were definitely some more comedic sections in this. I don't remember exactly where it is, but there is a part where someone's talking to Duncan, and it's just like Thaw stared back, Thaw
yeah,
stared, Duncan stared, he stared back. It's just like I yeah, I wish I could remember where that was, but I thought that was good, like comedic. Um, I could, yeah, I thought that was some good comedic touch.
yeah, yes. I'm looking at something else, but
Oh,
my
it would be 45,
oh yeah.
where he meets some random woman at the tea house or tea room, and this
Um,
woman's like, "Do you remember who I am?" He stared at her. "Remember how you said illness was useful sometimes?" He stared at her, and she's like, "Well, my doctor told me blah 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 blah." Thaw stared at her. "Did you know someone I forget said you were a genius?" Thaw stared at her. It's just like this woman's just like blah 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 blah.
oh god, yeah. This part is. I mean, it is funny. There's a lot of things I think I'd marked as like ha or like just general like little laugh out loud moments.
Mhm.
The mouse thing, obviously. Like, yeah, I mean, the part where he may or may not murder a woman and then kill himself, probably not the funniest. But like once you're back in part four, it is because of its surrealism is like a little bit more humorous and because of the imagery, the juxtaposition, whatnot. Do you have a favorite line? I've got mine
Do.
all. Okay, so they're
End with
talking.
yours if it's what I think it is.
Oh, it's definitely it's 100% what you think it is.
Do you wanna end with that, or do you want what I'm asking
Go,
is, do you wanna go second?
go, yeah.
Okay. So mine's at the bottom of 353, after he's walking around in the moors, um, and then descent is easy at first, then he comes to steeper rocks and must scramble down gullies of loose stones that collapse and slide, and this is Duncan. He falls the last few yards and lies under boulders among withered bracken, thinking, "I'm sore and I don't like it."
Yep. Oh, so mine is where they're in the institute too. They're getting out, and there are people that are Protestants, um, that are protesting and marching about the fact that they eat people there, and that they're opposed to this, and they're carrying. There are shaggy young men and women holding placards with slogans. The slogans are "Eat rice, not people." "Eating people is wrong." "Fuck Monbodo." And then Monbodo can't fuck. Monbodo can't fuck.
The first time I read
Yes.
that, I thought all of that was just one big sign, and I'm like, "That's an amazing sign," because it starts out strong and then it just digresses.
It's like the idea of like I can envision like I wish he had drawn it like one of his
Yeah.
drawings with all these like weird looking sort of like morphed up people
Yeah.
that are like in their like kind of like exaggerated character way and they're holding like placards and one just says Monbodo can't fuck.
Eating people is wrong.
Eating people is wrong. Monbodo
Moto
can't
can't
fuck.
fuck.
Anyways, if anyone has any information about Alistair Gray's life or times, please send it along. I don't know if you're going to do more research into that for next week. That would be great.
Yeah, I'll
Um,
try,
because
yeah. I'm
like,
I'm curi clearly, I'm interested, I'm curious.
and I think that's great. I think that is. I did not mean to shit all over your point. I really do want to emphasize that. I think that like his ability to describe something is super, super, super clutch. And I
Mhm.
never saw him as someone who's like a Philip K. Dick version of writers, where he's like, uh, I was schizophrenic, a drug addict, and that stuff's being put in here. I
Mm,
saw him more as like truly like someone who's visual artist and crafting things
yeah.
and more like kind of nerdy.
Oh,
Um,
yeah, the visual artistry, I mean, so we can't talk about the hair in this picture because there isn't really anything, but I wanna point out that not a day goes by that this book is in the house that I don't can think, like, "Oh, those are boobies." Like, look at this armpit hair. Look at how coiffed. Like, Alistair Gray could draw, like, locks. All these locks are luscious. Like, look at how
every
coiffed
time
that
every
armpit
time I
is.
see that, I think that
Mhm.
it's a flower.
Really?
Yeah.
I mean, even the I'm
I'm
sorry,
more I'm more
sorry,
obsessive
YouTube,
for
but even the pubic hair has, like, a little, like, coif to it. It's so intricate.
I'm more obsessive for people who are listening. This is great podcasting, but if you have the most recent cover of the book, the way that her leg and her hip affixes to her makes me think of it being like a GI Joe figure, like
Oh,
it's
yeah, yeah.
like an action figure sort of setup with like bendable legs, which I don't know if that's supposed to be like a symbol of something. We haven't really done a deep analysis of this front cover, but like or the back. I mean, there's a lot going on here.
This this guy I just noticed for the first time, speaking of coiffed hair,
Yeah.
He's got, like, a patch missing, like, it looks like someone yanked some out.
Yeah, yeah. I assumed that it was like a surgery thing.
Oh, I mean, it could be silver hair too, but it kind on this glance, it just looks like he got
Like
into a fight.
none of these people are necessarily people from the book, but it is wild. I do love this guy too on the back cover that's wearing
Mhm.
his like little cap,
Yeah.
looking super sad. Yeah, we should not go through all of this for the listeners, but anyways, I think we'll wrap up here. If you like what you hear, rate, review us.
Mash that like button.
Um, throw your takes in the comments below. Which one is the? I don't know. I don't know what those people say. What does Mr. Beast say?
I don't
Um,
know. Drop in the comments whether you liked the book 4. What do you like best? Book 4 image inside the book or book 2 image inside the book? Drop your answer below. I don't know. I can't do this either. I already fucked it up.
yeah, 454 next week. Think we're out.
Bye.
Alistair Gray was super high in LSD.
Torpedo pills.